Welcome to episode 200 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts on how to plan for the first week of school when everything feels uncertain. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript or find our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook. This episode is brought to you in part by ViewSonic, a leading global provider of visual solutions and a dedicated member of the educational community for over 30 years. They're proud to support teachers in schools by releasing new tools to help teachers teach remotely. Their MyViewBoard digital whiteboarding software has multiple distance learning tools that are currently offered for free during these trying times. Teachers have the option to either teach live or record the lesson to be shared later. Check it out today and get access at myviewboard.com/distance-learning. Also, if you want an education master's degree program that equips you to make a real difference in the lives of kids, check out Marian University. They have a 100% online, at-risk, and alternative education master's program. Marian University will help you design and implement alternative education methods and strategies to support our most vulnerable students. Learn from coursework that's designed to promote the ultimate in effectiveness for them and the best in flexibility for you. Visit marianuniversity.edu/ARAE for more info. So this is episode 200 of Truth for Teachers, and I'm really glad to be back with you after the summer hiatus. I have some really good topics planned for this fall, and you'll find that I'm seeking out the voices of lots of classroom practitioners about what's working this year and emerging best practices. So you'll be hearing lots of different snippets from different teachers who are talking about what they're doing in their classrooms. I'll admit that I did not think when I wrapped up season 11 back in May that we would be having this conversation that we're about to have, or that the tone of this coming season would be what it's going to be. At that time, back in May, we had flattened the curve in most of the U.S., and I think all of us were much more optimistic that the coming school year would be smoother than this past spring had been. And now that's not looking so likely. So I want to admit something here that you might not hear officially from your district, but I believe it's the core truth that some folks are avoiding. And it's this: you will probably have to set aside a lot of best teaching and learning practices this school year, particularly if you work with younger students. Full-time remote learning is just not ideal for many, if not most, students and families. And in-person learning, in which kids might be confined to their seats more and interacting with each other less, not sharing manipulatives and books or keeping 6 feet away from one another from you, well, that's also not ideal. There are no options for fall right now that provide optimal learning conditions, period. And I think intentionally going against what you know about pedagogy and the neuroscience of how humans learn best is going to create a lot of cognitive dissonance. There will be things that you have to do this year that you would never choose for your students outside of a global pandemic where students can't safely be in contact with one another. It will be heartbreaking for many teachers to undertake the challenges ahead this fall. I hope that doesn't sound depressing. I hope that sounds real and validating, because I hear from teachers every single day who are feeling like that. I want you to know it's not just you who's feeling like this is just a soul crusher for you as a teacher when you think about what you want to do with kids this year and what you're actually going to be able to do. I know this has the potential to break teachers' spirits, and we will probably lose many great teachers because of this. And yet, the willingness to diverge from our known best practices is going to be necessary, because we have to move into a different set of best practices that are based on the current circumstances. I believe our mission must be to develop a flexible, resilient pedagogy that carries us through this school year and beyond. The current limitations and obstacles, which are simply piled on top of the existing inequities, are going to be massive, and we have to mitigate the damage. We can't just take away all the stuff that was great for kids and write off an entire school year. We must find new ways to meet kids' needs as best we can. So a reimagining of schools is required. It's urgent, and that's a good thing. It's not like the old ways of teaching and learning were so manageable for teachers or so beneficial for students. We needed a complete overhaul of systems. We needed to rethink curriculum and rethink testing. And though this isn't the catalyst for change that anyone wanted, it is an opportunity to create massive change very quickly, and that's something that rarely happens in schools. We must be prepared to actively participate in the changes that are coming, because whatever's happening on day one of school is not going to be maintained throughout the year. Absolutely nothing is written in stone right now. Nothing's permanent. Take advantage of that opportunity to create change that's ultimately better for you and your students. There will be a lot of shifting policies and procedures, so be prepared to experiment and share your findings in a constructive, solution-oriented way. Speak up to ensure that you have the resources and training that you need to teach kids effectively and safely. Ask questions to get clarity on exactly what's expected of you and your students this school year. It's likely that your administrators and district leaders won't have those answers yet, but I encourage you to posit the questions anyway and place the responsibility back on those in leadership positions for solving these problems. It's incredibly disheartening to me to see every individual teacher across the nation trying on their own to figure out logistics right now, when we're facing so many similar challenges. Imagine if we had strong national leadership in the Department of Education, where true educational experts, including teachers, were working with health and safety experts to develop constructive solutions that could be adapted nationwide. Instead, we're figuring out a few things here and there, state by state, and then a few more things district by district, and then a few more things school by school, and then more things, especially the practical everyday logistics, teacher by teacher. Right now is a time when we need unity and we need leadership. We need consistency in support and recommendations. If we leave it up to every individual teacher to figure out how to make things work, then we're going to end up with even more inequities. So I encourage you to keep asking questions that folks in leadership positions might not have the answers to yet. The questions that you're wondering about are the same things that teachers all around the country are considering, and you deserve answers, particularly when it comes to health and safety protocols. Right now, teachers are largely unsure of how to reopen safely or how they should be teaching during the first few weeks of school. So they're just figuring it out, just making it work. That's what teachers do. You're used to hacking together workarounds without proper guidance or support or resources. But it's reasonable to find out what's expected of you before you begin planning. I want to speak for a moment to the folks whose school buildings are reopening soon. If there are no health or safety protocols for things like classroom libraries or manipulatives or lab equipment or cooperative learning, I think the best course of action is this. Don't plan that stuff for the first 2 weeks of school. Wait until you get official answers in writing. Having kids stay seated and avoid working together is obviously not best practice in normal situations. But this is a liability issue. If you don't have written guidelines for how to do those things safely, it's not worth the risk, in my opinion. Every individual teacher cannot make up their own health and safety precautions, particularly since some teachers will take none at all, and that puts the whole building at risk. This is not a time for teacher ingenuity and crowdsourcing and just making it work somehow. The wrong decisions can have devastating consequences. Any questions that teachers have about reopening safely should be directed to school leaders for official guidance. And if you can't get answers about a particular practice, then don't plan to teach that way until you get the answers. Protect yourself. Protect your students. I know it's frustrating not to have answers about how school buildings can reopen safely. However, you are not responsible for developing health and safety protocols for your classroom. That is not your burden to carry as a teacher. If you have ideas or suggestions, tell your school leader so they can approve them in writing. But if you're not given an explicit protocol, then keep your lesson plans simple for the first week or two of school. This will mean that you have to do things differently than normal, and it probably won't be as fun or as engaging for kids. But we have a bigger goal than engagement this year. which is keeping students, families, and teachers alive and healthy. That is more important than engagement. So if you're stressed because you're expected to do in-person teaching soon and you have no idea what it will look like, keep it simple. You can slowly incorporate more types of activities as you get a feel for how things are going to work and as more directives come down from leadership. Don't spend your whole summer planning how to have kids use math manipulatives or how your classroom library will operate, only to find out the day before school starts that you can't do it that way, and then work out a whole new system, then find out 2 days later the guidelines have changed again, and then find out 5 days later you're just going remote. Instead, write your lesson plans in a way that doesn't require kids to share materials for the first week or two of school. Only plan those kinds of activities when you have a written safety protocol, and then follow that protocol to the letter. In the grand scheme of a lifetime, it's not going to harm kids if they have to wait a little bit longer for those kinds of learning experiences, particularly if it means they'll be able to do it safely and not have the routine changed on them 100 times. Wait another week or two. Now here's where I want to loop in those of you who are teaching remotely at the start of the school year, or even for the whole first semester, or even for the entire year, as I know some of you are. The remainder of what I'll say applies to everyone. Don't invest a ton of time into planning until you know what you can and you can't do. I just heard from a teacher the other day who spent half of her summer uploading videos and assignments into Google Classroom under the assumption that she'd be able to use those resources no matter what happened this year. And then her district sent out an email saying they were switching to some other dedicated learning management system and Google Classroom would no longer be permitted. We know this kind of stuff happens all the time with schools. It's so frustrating. But you can mitigate the effects as much as possible by waiting to plan until you have directives. And this does not necessarily mean you're going to be scrambling 2 days before school starts. That would only be true if you were going to attempt to do everything that you've done in years past. That wouldn't all be possible to do in 2 days. But remember, you're scaling down your plans just for the first couple weeks. Whether you're with kids face-to-face every single day or just a few days a week, or if you're totally online, I think it's fair to say that your lessons for back to school are not going to be what you wish they could be this year. You're not going to be able to do everything that you did in previous school years. The sooner you can accept that, the easier it will be to plan, because you won't be spending so much energy trying to shoehorn in activities that just aren't going to work. The sooner you accept that the start of this school year is not going to be optimal for you or your students, the easier it will be to see things in a really clear-headed way and find the best possible solutions. Keep your lesson plans for the first week or so very simple. Don't take on more than you can handle, knowing that what you can handle this year is likely lower than normal due to stress and uncertainty and all the changes. Remember that the only person who knows what your first day plans were going to be is you. Your students won't know what you were planning to do or what they're missing out on. Those were just ideas in your head. And not being able to do those lessons right now doesn't mean you'll never be able to do them. They might work later in the year, and you'll probably be able to use them in future school years. This is just one back-to-school season out of your entire lifetime, and it's one back-to-school season out of kids' entire lifetimes. So scale things down. Simplify as much as possible. Plan only for the kinds of activities and platforms and tech tools that you know with a pretty solid degree of certainty that you'll be permitted to use. When it comes to health and safety protocols for in-person learning, plan only for the stuff that you have a written procedure for. And then see how things go. See what your students need. See what new guidelines develop and what emerging best practices unfold. You don't have to have it all figured out before the first day of school. That's true every year, and it's especially important to remember this year. We're all sort of building the plane while we're flying it. And we're adapting to kids' and families' changing needs. You won't know how to meet those needs until you meet your kids and you get to know them. Here's the takeaway truth that I want you to remember. If there's something that you need to plan for and you just can't wrap your head around it yet, ask your school leaders. If they can't figure it out, just don't plan to do it yet. Do something else with kids that is simpler and safer and that takes less work. And then when you have more answers, you can invest time into finding better solutions. I know this is hard. I know it's frustrating. This is not what any of us want for the start of the school year. But it's also all temporary. Things won't be this uncertain forever. You can do this. Remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.